Hi everyone, it's Donna. I hope you're all safe and well. Today we're going to be talking about the solar eclipse on June 21st, 2020, and that's a very unique type of solar eclipse because we don't often have a solar eclipse on the first day of a season. So we're going to be talking about that and what it means for everyone. So if you're new to the channel, I do videos on astrology and Feng Shui. Please hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button if you like videos like this because it really helps out the channel. And if you're interested in astrology, check out my program on Udemy on how to find the hidden money in your chart. This is a class I go step by step for you to find out what your second house is doing in your chart, how you can attract money, and I give a lot of examples. And so there is a link in the description box below. Also, if you want a copy of your natal chart, check out a link in the description box. There's a PDF that gives 3 different ways to get a chart, which one of them includes emailing me, and I will send you a PDF of your chart. And finally, if you don't know this already, I have written 16 books, including books on Chinese astrology and Feng Shui. There is some links to those books down in the description box below. So let's get started. When we're looking at the solar eclipse, we know, of course, solar eclipses happen on the new moon. And this one is particularly interesting because it is also happening on the first day of summer. So I wanted to know how unusual this was. So I went back 120 years and looked at all of the solar eclipses that we had had to see when we had had a solar eclipse on the first day of summer before. And it turns out that a few months before 9/11 in 2001, we also had a solar eclipse on the first day of summer. And I think that that's extremely interesting because I was talking to an astrologer friend in New York, and I'm on the West Coast, and so he has a very, of course, personal perspective of 9/11. And so he was telling me all of these different things that he found were similar astrologically to what was going on now with the pandemic. And so his overarching idea was that we were experiencing changes in our daily life, changes that were going to last forever. Now, he's a really brilliant astrologer. His name is Armand Diaz, and I'm going to put a link to his website. I don't think he has a channel, so a link to his website down below so you can check him out. So, but the bottom line is that we are experiencing changes through this eclipse and through the other 2 eclipses that are happening that are going to have the effect of changing our lives permanently. That means we are going into a new normal. Now, on this channel already, I have talked about how this set of eclipses is quite similar to the eclipses we had in the summer of 1918, where there was the worldwide flu or influenza epidemic. And so there are some similarities there. However, of course, in modern times, information moves much more quickly. And so hopefully we can get a handle on things, faster. Now, that all said, I am filming this at the end of May, and so there's still a few weeks before we hit this date, but it is my predictions that we may need to not necessarily have the government step in to say that there's a shutdown, but we ourselves may want to do some serious social distancing over the summer if the pandemic starts to rise again, which I think it really might, because we have 3 eclipses and Mercury retrograde, and we have Jupiter conjunct Pluto. So a lot of similar things that we had in 1918. So I am recommending to all my viewers and all of my clients, stay stocked up, wear a mask, do social distancing, take precautions, because this could be a very bumpy summer. And then, of course, then as we get into the fall and especially late fall, we do have more eclipses coming up in November and December. There is some energy in November that we're going to talk about in detail where I think we could have some issues again. And so we may have a little bit of some breathing room. Perhaps in September, we'll see how things go. But because I haven't gone through yet that third eclipse that's in July, and there is some really difficult energy towards the end of August with all the squares that we're going to get from Mars. So all that said, despite the fact that we are going through this and we're all going through this in our own way, and it's extremely hard on lots and lots of people, so we do have to be really understanding about that, especially when we're blessed. I am extremely blessed to be able to stay home and work and talk to you. And so it's really good if when we're out, we continue to take precautions. And if we're going to stay home, that we minimize how much we're out by staying stocked up. So the eclipse that was close in 1918 was June 24th, 1918 at 2 degrees of Capricorn. And when I say that's close, you know, you might in your mind say, well, that's an opposition, only off by 2 degrees. But 2 degrees, those 2 degrees are very, very different, because a 0 degree eclipse, like we're going to be experiencing on June 21st, is extremely intense. It is a critical degree, whereas 2 degrees of Capricorn is not a critical degree. So we need to keep in mind that because it's a critical degree, the energy is more extreme. Now, what is the 0 energy about? Technically, there are really 3 critical degrees. There are other degrees that can have some sensitivity, certainly in a person's chart, but the 3 critical degrees, 0, 15, and 29, of those 0, well, I shouldn't say of those, they all have very different energy. So the 0 degree, which is the degree that we're doing, is about a new beginning, like a birth, and it is that cosmic egg of potentiality. And so when we think of the 0 degree, we have unlimited possibilities, but we also have nothing that we are experienced with. We have no idea if anything's going to work. And so we can get very paralyzed in this idea that, oh, you know, I can start an online business, or, you know, I can study something, or, you know, there's all of these possibilities, especially with the internet, but what do we try? Because we have no guarantee of anything working, because the 0 degree says we have no experience, no history. Of course, there is also the 29 degree, and we are dealing with a 29 degree north node, south node. And so the 29th degree is that everything is done and we're having trouble letting go of it, where we are clinging to something to try to squeeze every ounce of juice out of it. And so the 29 can be difficult for that reason, that it waits too long to let go. If you have 29 degrees in your chart, you'll recognize this as when other people say, oh, you know, I'm leaving this neighborhood, or I'm leaving this job, or I'm leaving this relationship. You're the one who stays to the bitter end. And then there's the 15th degree, and I don't emphasize this so much in my consultations, but it is still an important degree, because when a planet reaches the 15th degree, at that point it is fully in that sign. You know, as it was still, you know, transiting those earlier degrees, maybe it has the possibility of retrograding back into that old sign. It's still testing the waters. By the time it hits 15, it's really there. But additionally, the 15th degree is you're at a crossroads. You can go right or left, you can go, because you're at the exact center point. You can go forward, you can go back. And so we have this energy of being a decision point. Now, we had Mercury at that point in Cancer, but for this eclipse, it's going to be at 14, so that is a non-critical degree. And that's also something to recognize. The 0 degree is critical, the 1 degree is not. So the 29 degree is critical, the 28 is not. And so in this case, the 14 is not a critical degree. Now, when I'm looking at whether an eclipse hits a person's chart, I give a 5-degree orb. And so when we are looking at an eclipse that is 0 degrees, we are going to go back into the previous sign to pick up those degrees. So we would go back 5 degrees and we would go forward 5 degrees. And so I know that sounds like some math, and don't worry about that. But what I would say is that if you have any planets or your ascendant or your midheaven or your north node between the 25th degree and the 29th degree, or the 0 degree and the 5 degree, so that would go 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is covered by this eclipse. So that means that not just cardinal signs are being affected by this eclipse, but mutable signs as well, because we are going back into that previous sign. So that said, if you are born between March 16th and March 25th of any year, then you are affected directly by this eclipse. If you're born between June 16th and June 25th of any year, you are affected by this eclipse. If you are born between September 16th and September 25th of any year, you are affected by this eclipse. And finally, if you are born between December 16th and December 25th, you are affected by this eclipse. Now, again, that's just your sun sign. You may get an eclipse hit to your moon, to your ascendant, to any of your planets, and still be affected. Now, it is also possible that you are looking at your chart and looking at the minor aspects or even major aspects, but they're trines and sextiles and things like that. When it's an eclipse, I do really focus on squares, oppositions, and conjunctions. Although if I see a direct hit and it's even a semi-sextile or an inconjunct, I'm definitely going to explain to you how that's going to affect your life. Now, all of this that I've said really requires some astrological knowledge and a copy of your chart. And so if you don't have a copy of your chart, there is a link in the description box below to a little PDF, which I show 3 different ways of getting a chart. So I encourage you to click on that. Included in that is my email. You can send me an email and just request your chart. I will send you a PDF copy. So let's take a look at the chart itself. And so very notably, the sun moon at 0 degrees of Cancer is making an inconjunct to Saturn in Aquarius. And so the Saturn at 0 Aquarius is indicating that social distancing, that is restricting our sociability. But when we add in the sun and moon, we do get separations, sadness, illness. We have all of that really built into this chart. But what are the positive uses of that inconjunct? Well, with any inconjunct, it's all about your ability to make adjustments. And so Saturn is a representation of career, and the sun and moon is a representation of your talents, abilities, and what you desire to have happen in your life. And now these two are not in harmony. And that means that you are possibly at home and now have been home for a few weeks and thinking, I'm not sure that I really like my career. And so this is a time to start making adjustments. Now, adjustment is different than out and out change. Adjustment is incremental steps to do something different. This is just opening up to the possibilities of doing something different, and so that the universe can start to send you opportunities. This is about you making small adjustments in the sense that, you know, perhaps you have wanted to do something different. You know, perhaps you've wanted to open a restaurant or start a podcast or maybe do your art or creativity for a living. But right now, you're doing something that is more mundane, something that is not singing to your soul. Well, what you can do with this is you make incremental changes, and that is that yes, maybe you're working at home now and that is still tiring. It's still, it's still a lot to do, but maybe because you don't have a commute, you have an extra half an hour during the day that you can then explore, opening an Etsy store or getting up a YouTube video or something like that, where you can perhaps take an online course or just go on YouTube, because there's tens of thousands of free, extremely helpful videos on YouTube. So exhaust that resource first. And then, of course, as a writer, let me say, go check out books on the subject, because there are so many books on it. And then I do courses, as I was talking about before. So yes, I do believe in courses, but you don't need an expensive course to get started, because remember, the sun is at 0. You're still just figuring out what it is you want to do. So in this exploratory place, you don't have to spend a lot of money. So, but what it does say is look at your job and say, is this really resonating with me anymore? Now, the other side of this in conjunct is looking at your career and saying, is it going to be there? And making those adjustments for that reason also. So, I have a lot of clients who worked for these higher end department stores because I love retail, and I have always connected to a lot of people through those outlets. And yet, of course, none of them are working right now, and they all need to find something else, not because they don't love what they were doing, but because that retail establishment may not be there in the future. And this was before the pandemic. They were seeing a very steep decline anyway in just retail selling, because everything is moving online. And I do feel that we are reaching a point of peak stuff, that we just have so much stuff. I walk by people's garages and they are filled to the brim with stuff. And in our current year, this is a year of metal rat, where we are more organizing resources and perhaps even hoarding a little bit, we will be in 2021 going into the year of the metal ox, and that is very much about simplicity. Like, what is it that I really need? And this rest of the stuff, how can I get rid of it? So, which means that thrift stores and charity outlets are going to be clogged with stuff in 2021. So you want to make your donations now so you don't have to wait in an endless line. And of course, my Goodwill is closed right now. I have piles of stuff ready to go. So, making those donations now, like when we can. So how do you figure out what your calling is? How do you figure out what direction to go? Because when it's a 0 degrees, it is a big unknown. It is this, as I said, egg of potentiality, which means that the egg can grow into anything. And so how do you know? Well, if you have your natal chart, you can look for those indicators and things like where is your Saturn in your natal chart? Where is your Sun in your natal chart? What's going on with your midheaven? What is going on with your Neptune? Those are the factors that you're going to find really help you define where you can go with your life. And so there are some great resources on learning your natal chart, but I just encourage you so much to focus on learning about yourself during this time, because there are so many changes coming. And as you know yourself, as you know what you need and want, and now that I say that, I should have included the moon in that list, super, super important, then you can start to explore different things that you can do. Now, of course, because I am very big on creating income sources, you may want to do something for a living that is in direct line with how your chart pulls in money. And we'll talk about this more when we're doing the individual predictions, but of course you would be looking at the second house, and if there's planets in the second house, those are planets are grabbing money from the different houses that second house rules, but also whatever sign is on that second house cusp, you can go out to that planet and know that that is a source of money for you. So you want to take all of these things into consideration now as you go out to explore your new life over these next few months. And because this is an eclipse, the energy can last 6 months, all the way up to the next eclipse. And so you'll see some changes in your life happening, but where we can expect most of the changes to gently unfold over the next 6 months. And then I do have to say that I know people get very nervous about eclipses, astrologers especially, because we know that they bring change. But overall, always, eclipses bring a change that was needed. And when we look back on what happened, we always say to ourselves, oh my gosh, I needed that push. I needed that shove into this new job or into this new relationship or, out of that terrible apartment or whatever. Remember that while it's going on, you are in a few weeks or months going to look back and say, oh, thank goodness the universe helped me with this. So the next notable thing in this chart is that Jupiter has gone retrograde and now it is moving back to conjunct Pluto again, which is also retrograde but moves really, really slowly. Now, Jupiter was conjunct Pluto in April, right at the, just a few weeks after most of us went into lockdown. And so we do see this as a marker of this pandemic. Jupiter expands whatever it touches, and Pluto is death and destruction and all of these things that cause us to really transform our lives. And of course, if you look back in history, there was a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in Cancer during the 1918 pandemic. So we see this as one of those markers. Now, but in a personal chart, Jupiter-Pluto is entirely different. Jupiter and Pluto is a huge amount of ambition. It is faith in yourself. It is a sense of protection while you transform your life. So wherever the Jupiter and Pluto are falling in your life, you can completely transform that energy through your own desires and wishes to make something new happen. And so when we do the individual predictions, make sure to check out where Jupiter and Pluto is falling in your chart, and that's going to give you the clue of where to focus your energy. Now, Jupiter is going to run right by Pluto, and then it's going to continue to go backwards, I think to 17, and then it's going to turn and go direct, and they will conjunct again in November, which is why I am saying that we could have our second wave in November, and so we do need to continue to protect ourselves, do social distancing, keep stocked up, and take all the precautions that we should. Now, North Node and South Node are at 29 degrees, and as I mentioned, that's a critical degree. The North Node is in Gemini, the South Node is in Sagittarius, and so the Gemini North Node says that we feel a need to collect lots and lots of information, and in some ways that could be really good. That could be you scanning some different classes or videos, learning more about yourself and where you should be going with your life. Or you could be caught in a loop just watching, the news cycle over and over and over again. And this may have some limited benefits, but may not be benefiting you overall. And so you do want to be cognizant of the information that you're taking in. It also says with the South Node that we are going back to spirituality, and that's very important, doing spiritual practices on a daily basis where we might be praying, meditating, communing with the universe, lighting candles, chanting, singing, dancing. All of these things can really put us in a space where we get into sync, in harmony with the universe, and therefore we recognize the opportunities that the universe is bringing us and the gentle nudges that the universe is giving us to get us on our path. Now, what's most notable about the North Node, South Node at this critical degree is it's being squared by Mars in Pisces, And this is a point of decision. So if you think of the south node is where you're coming from, the north node is where you're heading, that Mars is kind of driving right in that T fashion. And so it's causing decisions. It is causing you to be aware of the decisions that you're making. And it is taking the Mars, which the Mars in Pisces is very much about going the one or two ways. You can be the person who is just caught up in fear and conspiracy theories and just twirling around, not sure what direction to go. Or you are the person who has this vision of what could be, the potential that we have. I mean, just when I think about what my grandfather, who was 18 years old in 1918 in Pittsburgh during the pandemic, what he was going through compared to the resources that we have now. I mean, he didn't even have a telephone, let alone internet. And so there was, he had to wait for the newspaper to come out to find out anything. And so we are able to gather information and make good decisions. And so we have the potential to reach people, to connect with people, whereas they didn't last time, which would have, I think, even more caused people to go out and meet with each other, even though they knew that it was dangerous because they were just so desperate. And at least we can connect through different mediums, even if we can't see each other face to face. And so we are so incredibly lucky to be in this world now where we have the opportunities that are available to us. But that's only if we use this Mars in Pisces to see optimistically, to see the potential of things, and to allow the Pisces to dissolve the barriers that we have, the fears that we have, and dissolve the insecurities that we have to go forward. So if you've studied astrology, you know that oftentimes we associate Pisces with addiction. And that, of course, does not mean if you're Pisces, you are addicted. In fact, all of us can be addicted to something, especially in this day and age. And that is actually one thing that my grandfather did not have to cope with, and that was dopamine addiction, where we get addicted to the little pings and the likes and all of that. So I'm guilty of that. So many people have a problem with that we have to look at where our minds are taking us. Are we going towards the spiritual? Are we looking at this thing, the things that are going on, as that we're needing to change, we're needing to adjust? Or are we looking at things as, okay, I feel bad, so I'm just going to do the same things over and over and become addicted to them? So this T-square, and traditionally not necessarily a T-square because we don't normally count the south node and part of a T-square, but let me just, because I wanted to illustrate that Mars is dividing the south node, which is the past, and the north node, which is the future, right in half. You're coming to the crossroads. You're having to make a decision. Do you want to go back into old habits, or do you want to form new, very healthy habits? Next, we see that Uranus is making a semi-sextile to Chiron. This has been going on a while. This is just a reminder to look at the different things that you're doing to keep you safe and keep an open mind. So this says don't dogmatically do anything, but to look and change things up as new information comes in. So that means weighing healing techniques and things that you're doing to stay healthy and strong, and change those up. The Uranus is also, we're going to talk about this more, but the Uranus is in the second house, and that is disrupting incomes for a lot of people. And so we will be talking about that in a moment. Venus is retrograde in this chart, and it went retrograde on May 12th, and it's going to be retrograde until June 24th. And when Venus is retrograde, we have to relook at what we want. And so that coincides with what we were saying about the Sun Moon in conjunct the Saturn, and looking to find things that are more in line with your needs as well as your talents. And then Mercury is also retrograde It went retrograde on June 17th and will be retrograde until July 12th. And of course, Mercury retrograde, we all know that one really well. Very difficult to buy new electronics, to deal with car issues, because it can really disrupt things like that. It can disrupt communications. And so we have to be more patient when Mercury is retrograde. However, there's a plus. There is a reason that Mercury goes retrograde, and that is that so we go back and do the things that we didn't have time for or that we neglected, especially around paperwork, especially around things that we need to think through again. So as you know, it's challenging because we are all moving forward at a clip that we don't necessarily leave ourselves time for going backwards, but that's what the Mercury retrograde is about. And so the 3 or 4 times a year that it does this is our opportunity to go back and do something and work on that thing when we probably should have worked on it before, but we didn't have time for whatever reason. And now the Mercury is there saying it's time. So as I was hinting when we were talking about Uranus just a couple of minutes ago, I'm not overly optimistic about our economic prospects over the next few months because we have Uranus, which will be going through that second house for some time. But what it does is it can disrupt income. It will also disrupt our forms of currency, which means that credit card companies could be making some changes that are not necessarily beneficial to everyone, that your personal income may be disrupted. We'll talk about that during the individual predictions. And also that just the way money is being distributed right now, it seems like things are not necessarily so equal or balanced. Now, if we add that up with the Saturn in Aquarius, still in that money derived from career, we have some businesses starting to open, but they're not opening to big crowds because the Saturn's at 0. So the place is open, but people don't know if it's safe to go, whether they should. And so with the Saturn there, that is going to depress incomes from career. And so a lot of people who could be expecting a paycheck, maybe not getting it. Now, if we also consider that that combination of Saturn in the 11th house would rule government, now we again have that block. That's that issue that maybe the government programs have run out of money, or that we're reaching a deadline in the government programs. Maybe it needs to be extended. So we'll have to see what the government does about that. If we also put in that Venus is retrograde and Mercury is retrograde, I just don't see a lot of economic activity going on. So I'm not seeing a V-shaped recovery. Not necessarily. If it's a U, it's like a bowl. So it's going to take some time to get there. Now, of course, there's going to be some industries that do really, really well. We've seen it already. And this is, in some ways, this is just how we go into a new age, you know, similar to probably my grandfather's time where, you know, not many people had cars even back then. And so there was this idea that, you know, you have to give up your horse, and that means the guy that makes the buggy whips and then makes the buggies and all that, he goes out of business. But the guy who's making the cars, he does really well. And so this is one of those transitions that we're going into. So if we look at just money overall, what we see is Taurus on the second house, ruled by that Venus retrograde in the third house in Gemini. And that means that through communication and connection, that's how people can make money. So that is talking to your boss, talking to your credit card company, talking to your banker, all of that. It's about open communication. And it says, again, because it's retrograde, you have to do it more than one time. Now, if we look at the aspects that this Venus is doing, it's making a semi-sextile to that Uranus. So I'm going to say that some businesses are opening, some are going to surge, but because it's a semi-sextile and it's a looking back semi-sextile, it is not as strong as some people are hoping. This Venus is also making a trine to Saturn, and so again, there's more promises of businesses opening, and maybe they're still figuring out how they can do that. But also, you yourself might be looking around saying, hey, if I don't leave the house, why do I need to buy clothes? Or, perhaps you are thinking you want to go eat at a restaurant, but maybe that would be tough because you also want to wear a mask. And so this Saturn says that there's still restrictions on that Venus. Now, that Venus is also making the semi-sextile to the eclipse point itself. And so that Venus is in the semi-sextile, which is that slightly irritating point with our point of change. That is, we have to look at what we think we want and what we have wanted in the past and now make some adjustments to that. That's where we're going to really thrive and really prosper in this as we make those really small incremental adjustments. So yes, I would love it if I had to just work out one time and just do a really hard workout and I'm good for the year. But it just doesn't work that way. I have to work out every day, and so it's the same thing here. It is the smallest little adjustments. It is that over time, I tell people, you write 50 words a day and you will have a book at the end of the year. So I have to do that math. Hold on. Yeah, you would have a book. 18,250 words is what you would have, which just 50 words a day. So that's pretty incredible. So consider that if you just do incremental changes, everything can go really, really well over time. And that's what this eclipse is about. And then finally, this Venus is actually positioned well for us in the sense that it's making an out of sign semi-sextile to the north node and an out of sign semi-sextile to the south node. And what this does is it means it's less painful for us to want to go backwards than forwards. So, it's still a little bit painful to go forwards, but going backwards is more painful. And that means that we are going to be inclined to go forward. That's to our benefit. And again, this was about the financial look. So it is that most people are going to go out of their comfort zone just a little bit, just putting the toe into the water to see if there's other ways to go out there and make a living, maybe through your communication, your connection with people, or through your creativity, or any of the other things that you in your heart know would be better for you.